to make it available to you to get all the details to the developer. But the way it works is, I think it's very different from what I can recall from Windows many years ago. When things crash, you can just report or not report. You don't really know what it reports. It could report anything. It could just report your screen resolution or your, personal lives and maybe some names of files, but you don't really know what it files. And in Linux, it gives you a final report, which gives you exactly in text what's going to be sent. So it says, well, you're using this architecture, so you can validate and ensure it doesn't send anything which may infringe on your privacy, or actually be concerned, especially if you're inside a company. It might actually send some details you're not supposed to be sending outside the company about things like the operating system or the location or IP addresses, things like that.
I mean, what I would say as well, from the feedback of all the people that I've deployed Linux to in the past, the command line is always one of those words where people sort of run away screaming from, and have this wrong assumption that it's complicated or difficult to understand, and it's actually not. When you spend the time just having a look at it, there's no secret, no mystery. And the other good thing with Linux, and this is feedback from every single person I've deployed it to, if they have an issue or a question, they can Google it and find an answer within seconds. Unlike what I've observed in Windows before, where problems are fudged over with a bit of PR and excuses and things like that. In the Linux world and the free and open source software world, bugs are acknowledged and sorted out very, very quickly. And usually it's a very simple solution which can be achieved couple of seconds the time it takes you to type in a Google search. And certainly all the issues that I've had in the past, whilst they've been very, very minor, I've always found the answer with Google, always, or any search engine. Very, very simple to do. So, there's a big myth, I think, around the command line. I bought a few books on command line scripting just to further my knowledge, and the sorts of things that you can do with it make it a very, very powerful tool. And people often say, well, there's no point typing in commands, and you should be using your GUI to do all the tasks for you because you've got one button one-button fixes for everything. But when you actually look into what the command line can do, and some of the piping is probably one of the best piping data to different commands, and that's just one of the examples that the command line is a very powerful and very simple thing to get involved in. I think when a lot of people try it, they don't want to go back to the desktop as much, certainly for batch tasks and all sorts of things.
Yeah, so, I wrote a couple of articles about it earlier this month. I think maybe even 3 this month, about the command line, because what I have in my workplace is people like to use GUIs, and they always have the doctor in mind, that they think, well, the person in the hospital is going to want to work with a GUI. And I'll say that, okay, fine, but they want you to try and operate these things with GUIs. And what you have to then do, in my case, have to ensure it is actually compatible with the command line and the GUI. And the reason is, if you want to run simulations, it's really hard to do with the GUI, especially if you want to leave the computer to do some tasks on its own right. So you can actually script the jobs you want it to do, instead of opening windows and clicking things all the time over and over again. So one of the things that I've been doing this for many years, I always have both a GUI and a command line option, and I make sure they're both kind of compatible. But one of the things you can do with the command line is you specify a bunch of commands, specify a bunch of things that you want to test the program with, and then you just let the output go into some files, and you can check them later and see what happened. With the GUI, it's really easy, but it's really hard to automate things. You have to tell things. You cannot actually emulate clicking a button or something. It's really complicated. And then once you get something like a window, what do you do with it? You probably want to save it to disk. You don't really want to display a picture. You want to save it to disk, and you can look at this later. So lots of people are very much stuck in the mentality of the GUI. And what I usually find, I'd say with kind of tongue-in-cheek type way, usually they are Windows users. They have this mentality of, you build a program, it has to be a GUI. And then I sit there and I use VI to edit my code, and they kind of get scared. Oh, what is this? It's disgusting. Where's the GUI? Where'd you click? And I was, no, that's how I develop. It works fine, and it's very fast, and but they find it very intimidating, and they want you to use the same thing they use to do development, even though you have your way of doing things, and it's more efficient.
I think, especially in Windows with Microsoft, I mean, my view has always been that Microsoft likes to hide as much stuff as it can from the user, under the pretense of it being, user friendly and we're thinking of you and things like that. But what you find is, you get a generation of users, especially I hate using this word, but mainstream users today, but are completely dependent on whatever packages or whatever fixes or whatever options that Microsoft gives them. If they don't receive it from Microsoft, they can't do it because they just don't know. They haven't got the knowledge and haven't had the experience because all this stuff has been taken away from them. And somebody in Microsoft who's behind Windows and its development says, right, well, we don't want users doing this. We want them to do it with our little button or our little icon, and we'll do that automatically for them, and it takes sort of the control away from the end user.
It works fine as long as it works. The issues not trying to sound biased here, but with Microsoft, it's known that they release the product not when it's ready, but when it's good for shareholders. And a lot of the time, they do release the product knowing that they need an SP1, they need an SP2 before it's actually ready. But it makes sense from a business point of view to throw it out there as soon as possible. And things just don't work. Like, network, sometimes the network would slow down. People would take several hours to copy a few megabytes of, just completely serious bugs. And there is no way around these things. You cannot just get a different package in Windows or install a different desktop environment or something if it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And you're stuck with something where you cannot pass files around reasonable speed.
I'll give an example. One of the people that I deployed Linux to, they had hopefully I'll explain this in such a way that people can grasp what I'm trying to say. But they had a directory full of text files, various letters, emails, and things like that they'd saved and pasted in text files. But they had a whole list of them in a directory, and they wanted to catalog them, but didn't want to use any sort of cataloging or database software. So they were just creating another text file with sort of an index of all these files. And I was round at his house at the time, and he had two windows open on his screen. One window which was the list of all the files in the directory, and another window open with just a basic text editor. And he was typing in each file name and then putting a little dash by it and saying what it was. And that was going back to the example of the command line. Now, within the command line, within a couple of commands, you can get a directory listing and you can output it to a text file instead of the screen.
Yeah, I did that yesterday afternoon, actually. Yeah. Exactly
and
that.
If he'd used that, then all he would have had to do was put his little notes afterwards, whatever notes he wanted to put in referring to each of the files. It's simple things like that which have been taken away over the years and hidden from the user, and which has now fostered this environment of fear of the command line. And we're not talking rocket science. It's a couple of commands to do it. So that's why I always say to everybody, even if you have no intention of doing this, just have a look at the command line, just see what features it does offer you, because little things. I mean, there's a very good command which I used to use very often, a curl, which you used to be able to send tweets with, and I'm not sure if that's now changed because of the changes at Twitter. Do you know if curl still works? I heard there was a problem.
Curl is usually fetching URLs.
I was using curl because you can actually send data to Twitter via it.
Why not use an ncurses type of interface you have lots of I think there is Identicurse. I've never seen that. I just keep seeing people in Identica mentioning all kinds of names of applications they use. But I do know you have some very nice feature-rich applications based on the command line. Mm. You can probably use the mouse too if you want to, where it actually runs in the prompt.
Curl I found, and I used it. It was more of a sort of novelty thing because I do most of mine just with with a browser-based Twitter client. And in fact, actually, I've moved away from Twitter now and mainly concentrate on Identica because that echoes my Twitters to Twitter anyway. But yeah, you can. Curl was very handy because you could. With a few options and a few arguments, you could send your username password to the API and obviously send a tweet from the command line. I'm sure I wrote an article about that.
I'd like to see more people using command lines with their phones if they need to, because sometimes they can just do it. I don't think lots of people use phones in general. Just tend to even SSH to a server or home PC to just check text files. And even when they do have text, lots of the kind of average people they tend to have these things in bloated formats like doc files or PDFs and things, and I always try to avoid that unless I really need formatting, and if I do need formatting, I can do things in text, pseudo format and things like lines, long lines, or trying to emphasize things all caps. And the reason is it's just a lot easier to search for patterns. When I look for certain files, I can just use the find command very fast in a directory. It's easier to do comparison between files based